Hello, everyone. This is Leilani Cawthon, your host from the Learning Council News, Media, and Research Organization. Glad to have everyone with us today. All right, so I have with us today Dr. Jenni Gotto. Nice to have you also with us, Melissa and Molly. So we're excited to hear from you guys. I'm going to go back off video and let you seize the screen from me to share. And then as questions come in, I'll interject or whatever, or you guys can be watching chat too. And then at the end, we'll come back in with comments. Is that cool?
Yep.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to stop sharing screen so you can share screen if you want to, or we can just have open conversation the whole time.
Okay, so thanks for giving us an opportunity to share our work this year and some threads of our work over the past 12 years. We're coming from Westminster, Colorado, so Westminster Public Schools. We are a PK-12 competency-based from top to bottom, every content area. We're about 12 or 13 years, I think, into our implementation of a system that acknowledges where students are starting. Here on this first slide, you do see our visual of our model, which focuses on kind of 5 key pillars that we believe, as we think about our approach to responding to COVID and the pandemic, has really positioned us well to be able to respond to all of the nuances that many of us in education have experienced, that we were not set up in our traditional models to be able to respond in the way that I think maybe we had some flexibility, maybe that others did not. So when we talk about our competency-based model, we talk about shared vision at all levels, from students to our Board of Education and our community. Leadership at all levels, again, looking at all those different pieces. I'm just going to go through this very fast because a presentation on our competency-based system could go on for hours. Our competency-based design, I think, which is one of the key pieces that has allowed us to really respond to where students are at. And certainly when we've been in and out of school since about a year ago, since last March, being able to really precisely pinpoint where students are at and be able to start back up during the summer, in the fall, and after each one of the breaks that students had to take. We track data at a very precise level through that competency-based component of our model. Continuous improvement. One thing, if we have some time to touch on it today, a lot of what we'll talk to you about today is things that we've learned, things that have been successful, and things that we've struggled. And we're really framing this from Lewin's model right now about things that will freeze and unfreeze and refreeze. There's some things we've learned through COVID that I think will benefit us forever, that will change what we've done in our schools and in our classrooms for the better. So everything hasn't been all bad as we've been through this experience. All of that building into a learner-centered classroom, really putting students at the center of their instruction. So that's just a quick overview of the model. I'm joined today by Melissa, who is, I think, we added a new position a couple years ago, which could not have been more important in the times that we've experienced over the past 12 months. And she is our Director of SEL and Student Agency. And then another brand new position this year as we launched our first ever virtual school. Molly has served as the Assistant Principal for Westminster Virtual Academy, which is our PK-12 virtual option for students that about a third of our students are involved in this year. So Molly has been there from the very beginning and can answer some questions about how we stood that school up in very quick order this year. So as we have looked at our response to COVID, we've offered up a few different options for our families. So obviously we here in Westminster on March 13th, last year, we went into remote learning for all of our families. We had a built-in learning management system that I think we deepened everybody's implementation, from our teachers to our students to our parents during that time. But I think that tool, a full-blown learning management system that's competency-based, gave us a mechanism to meet students' needs. We offered that through the end of the school year. We made a decision early on in June that no matter what, we were going to offer a few different options for our families, and we started surveying families in May and June last year to say, is your intent to come back in person next fall with very, very detailed safety precautions that each one of our schools put together? Or would you like to engage in a virtual option? And we asked our families to commit to at least a semester in that school. And so we had the in-person learning, the virtual learning through Westminster Virtual Academy. And then also we knew we needed to maintain some kind of thread of a remote learning model, knowing that at some point, some students would have to go out because of they've been exposed to the COVID virus, whether it be at school or at home. And so those were the three models that we had in place. Through that survey, we had about 400 families say that they wanted WVA, our Westminster Virtual School. And in the end, about 3 weeks into the school year, as you know, different things were happening with the pandemic, we ended up with at one point 2,200 students in our virtual program. At this point, after semester, we are at about 1,600 students in the true virtual program. And then we have a couple schools that just the numbers were so extreme that they have a remote option built into their school directly. So we have a few different versions, but that kind of gives you a big picture of what were the hybrid. When we came back in the fall, we came back full 5 days. We didn't actually opt into any of the hybrid models where kids were in a couple days a week. We did commit to full 5 days, and we were able to stick with that until November, when the community saturation got too high. And as a community, we kind of went back into that shutdown. But then right when we came back from Christmas break, we brought all of our students back, and since then have been full 5 days with every teacher in our staff member in our district wears goggles and KN95 masks, which has addressed the problem we had in the fall, which was operational shutdowns. When one student would walk through the door, it would take at least 6 staff members out. And if you had 3 students at Westy High with 2,400 kids, we had that in many cases, which took out 18 teachers, and we do not have 18 subs in a good year, and certainly not in our COVID year. But coming back with these precautions in place with our Tri-County Health Department, we have not had to quarantine our teachers at that level anymore, which has allowed us to stay open, and we believe it will through the end of this year. So that's kind of our response to the different learning options that we have. We've also know when kids were at home, and I'm a mother that I bring my child to the district, and he's an only child, and being at home for March, April, and May, and then through the summer in full lockdown was really hard. And I think that's where we're going to focus our attention today. That's where Melissa's work really came into play, where we knew as our students returned to us, and our teachers, our staff, our parents, the social emotional needs of our families, of our community, we put that as a priority right alongside the academics. So Melissa's going to jump in and talk about our social emotional supports as a response to the COVID pandemic. And then Molly's going to give some perspectives of what that looks like in our mitigation strategies at a specific school level, speaking specifically around our virtual program. But Molly also serves, and today is actually serving as the principal of one of our brick and mortar schools. So she's kind of got a few different perspectives that if you have questions, feel free to throw those into the chat. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Melissa.
Thanks, Jenny, and thank you everyone for inviting us to be here today. As Jenny mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and just focus on a few components that have to do with supporting emotions and supporting the social emotional side of learning. One piece that Jenny talked about is a huge part of our competency-based design is the learner-centered classroom. And you really can't be a learner-centered classroom unless you are considering the social emotional needs of every person. And what we find is that the social emotional needs can change from student to student and from staff member to staff member. When we opened up the 3 options that Jenny talked about, we had to stop and ask ourselves, what are those trauma-informed supports and social emotional supports that we want to make sure are universally in place for everyone, regardless of the setting, because we know that social emotional needs are something that we need to address across settings. So whether somebody's attending virtual or teaching in a virtual setting or hybrid or remote, we still know that we are all human and have social emotional needs. So what our framework really is rooted in for that component of our SEL model is a model called the person brain model. And this is something that's referred to as a neurotransactional model, neuro referring to the brain, transaction referring to relational transactions between people. And without getting into a ton of detail, the part of that model that I want to highlight, we did train all of our administrators and mental health staff the summer prior to returning in person last summer in this model. But the model, really, these 4 elements are what this model is rooted in. And basically what it says is that for humans to flourish, whether it's a child or an adult, people need to feel safe, significant, respected, and related. And so we used this as the 4 elements for our social emotional recovery framework, in which all of our schools were able to establish a social emotional recovery plan, really diving in with their staff to think about, are there strategies to proactively plan for staff and students to feel safe? For example, safety extends beyond a secure building, right? We want people to know, have a level of predictability, environmental safety. Jenni talked about, of course, the implications with COVID. This was a big deal for us, and putting that safety precautions in place first. The next piece is feeling significant. During times of trauma and crisis, we know that people want to feel like they matter and that there's a sense of purpose here. And I think it's in a time like the pandemic, it's easy for us to get caught up in all of the day-to-day crisis. So really grounding people back to their why, and back to what is their sense of purpose and what does each person bring to the table that's unique. Are people respecting each other? When we were returning to in-person learning, there were definitely some implications from the political climate that we needed to consider, in the social climate. And making sure that people are related. So what we know about the brain is that we function at its best. The brains function at their best when they're connected with other people. So do we have strategies to promote relationships? If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide there. And so all of our schools did come up with an SEL recovery framework that are rooted in those 4 elements here: safe, significant, respected, and related. We went through a training, provided them with all of the components to do that. And I'm going to turn it over to Molly now. She's going to talk a little bit about what some of those components look like for the Westminster Virtual Academy.
Thank you. So I'm just going to talk about each component and a couple things that we've been doing at the Virtual Academy to try to hit each component. So for SAFE, for us especially, it really goes to relational and predictability because we don't have a physical building. So really making sure that we're supporting families and setting up a virtual learning environment that's good for them, having predictable expectations and increased communication. I think that's one thing that we've learned is people feel safer when they know what's going on. So making sure that students know their schedule, teachers are communicating any changes far in advance, and that the school is communicating on a weekly basis between staff and students to make sure that everyone feels safe there. And then we also have an amazing counseling team that's available to support our students in any emotional support that they need. And then the next one. So the next one is significant. And this one has been a really big deal for us at the Virtual Academy, and one thing that I've been struggling with because I'm such a in-person type of person. So it's been fun to learn about this and how to do it in a virtual way. So the first thing that's really been important is reminding staff of their why. I think it's hard when we're feeling like we're in a silo to remember why we got into education in the first place and why it's so important for our students to have us in front of them every single day. So reminding staff how significant they are and why they got into this. We do fist bumps every single week. So staff send out fist bumps to me for other staff members that go above and beyond. but our staff are also does fist bumps for students. So they will say how students are going above and beyond each week, and we send those out in our newsletter to show how amazing our students are and how amazing our staff is. One thing that we did also was the starfish story, which you can see in the left corner. Sorry, my radio is going off. Of course, it hasn't gone off all day. Now it is. So the starfish story is about a man walking down the beach and a boy is picking up starfish and throwing them into the ocean. And I feel like this is so this year. There are some starfish that are on the beach and they're struggling to make it to the ocean. So helping staff to remember the starfish that are in the ocean and that are inching closer each day, and that they have such a significant impact on those students' lives, and not to get caught up on the few kiddos that are really having a hard time making it, and that we're doing everything we can. And then having a classroom environment that's personalized to each student's needs. This is what's been huge with our CBS system. Students feel significant because their learning is significant. Everything that they're learning is personalized to them. So that's been a huge deal here. Okay, and then the next one is respected. So we make sure to have surveys that emphasize student and staff voice. So we've sent out some student surveys on social emotional learning, and then had conversations on how we can help students feel more respected in the classroom, as well as giving surveys to staff to make sure that they feel respected as a staff member of WVA. We've also learned that communication is key, especially in a virtual setting, and how we communicate depends on how people feel respected or not respected. So looking at an email maybe isn't the best way to communicate when you are feeling really passionate about a student because you want to help them grow, but picking up the phone is the better way to communicate. So those little things that you don't think of has been one big thing that has helped people feel respected, is how we communicate and which modes of communication we're using. And then we've been doing what's hot and what's not meetings with staff. So I meet with every single staff member individually and let them have a space where they can tell me what's going really well, what's not going well, and how can we brainstorm together to make it a place where all feel respected. And then being highly flexible, because curveballs are thrown at us every day. So respecting the idea of flexibility has been a huge one for us as well. And then related. So I think that this one is sometimes the most important one because people need to feel that they are in a community, even though they feel like they're in a silo. So one thing that we've been doing is making sure that staff has level teams that they can collaborate with, and that they're not feeling like they're planning alone. Each student has a homeroom teacher and a point of contact. So even our high schoolers that have multiple classes throughout the day have a point of contact that help them to feel like they have someone that really truly cares about them and wants what's best for them every single day. And then we've also opened up a few virtual clubs, which have been amazing in helping students feel connected. We have art club, anime club, and a math club, which is really fun. So all of those things have been great for just building relationships between staff and students. And I'll turn it back over to Melissa.
And I wanted to just share this visual. I won't get into detail because there is a lot of information on this slide. But one thing I just want to point out is that for many of our staff members, it was really important that we connect what we were doing back to the big picture and reminders of post-pandemic, and that what we're doing is going to be something, as Jenni mentioned in the beginning, that we want to refreeze for after the pandemic. And so that this is not just a Band-Aid for the pandemic, this is actually changing and reforming how we do things. And so you'll see those 4 elements that are now part of our social emotional learning model, because before we can even explore what are the strategies that we use and the instructional practices that we endorse, we need to make sure that we have those 4 fundamental elements in place. And so our goal is really to make sure that people are feeling safe, significant, respected, and related through trust, creating a sense of belonging in our community, an equitable environment, and of course, focusing really heavily on relationships. So it was really important. One thing we found was to tie things back to the big picture for post-pandemic. And then I did see a question in the chat or in the one in the Q&A that popped up talking about how did we support student connectedness to peers and staff. And I think this is another piece that will be addressed to answer that question. Another component of the person-brain model, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the fact that people have lost motivation during this challenging time. And we hear that, what are great strategies for motivating students? What are strategies for keeping our staff motivated? And I wanted to share this component because motivation and transformation lead to resilience. And that process really is a sequential journey. And one thing that has been useful for us is to back up and focus on what actually precedes that, which is a sense of hope. And making sure that we are supporting our staff and students in figuring out, what does bring a person hope. And again, we're a personalized system, so that can change from person to person. So it's not a one size fits all strategy that is going to motivate every person. But we do want to provide the space and time for people to have that exploration into their own awareness and their own hope. What brings them hope? What we know about the brain is it releases dopamine when hope is a factor, and that in turn leads to motivation. So if you want to go to the next one. And one thing that we are doing, a program called Emergenetics, which is based here in Colorado, where we are allowing our staff and students, we're just now expanding to students, but our staff members, it's been really critical to provide them with the time and space to explore how their experience has been through the pandemic. So we've done that through a program called Emergenetics, but there are, of course, a lot of different ways of helping your staff to do that. But really tapping into their strengths and their unique thinking preferences. So what you're looking at here are the different thinking preferences and behavioral attributes that we focus on. And then we use those for strategies to help our students and staff connect with one another and embrace the diversity that exists within the way that we think and behave. And then our last slide, bringing it back to the basics and figuring out where each person is in the hierarchy of needs. Everyone is responding differently. And so it's really a matter of meeting people where they are and providing them with those supports. And so these are just some tips that we've found to be useful for each of those areas. And as I look at the time, I know that it's 12:28, so I'm going to stop there and open it up for questions or turn it back over to our moderators.
Okay, so this is Leilani. I'm back online. This is awesome. You know what I really, really have loved is that you didn't skimp at all on the social emotional side, which I have to say, as learning counsel, listening to innumerable superintendents and leaders across the nation for the last year, 20,000 some attendees on these webinars, I think there was a lot of skimping going on out there, but you guys didn't do that. I think you answered Mark Schneiderman's question, but Mark, did you have anything more? I'm allowing you, I just hit allow to talk. So do you want to ask anything else about that?
Oh, yeah, thanks, Lonnie. Yeah, it was just really a question about, for the students who are virtual, really how you're supporting their socialization as part of the learning process that's so key to the social emotional health of students and losing that connection in the physical classroom. Any details there would be really great to hear some of your experiences.
I think you addressed a number of them. I'll let Molly speak to this as well, but I think we I think a lot of people, you choose your different tools. Zoom has been kind of our backbone, but we're at a big Kagan district before. And so that was a big struggle is how do how do you make sure all voices are in the room, and how do we Kaganize our virtual instruction. And so we actually did a lot of sessions, and we have a few coaches that we were able to keep on staff this year. Most we had to put back into the classroom just to keep our numbers where they needed to be able to reopen our school. But we did a lot of work with teachers on how you bring some of those aspects in and how you leverage the breakout rooms. And so we were very intentional about even the virtual program we selected, making sure we believe teachers are a core piece of that. And that we wanted them to ensure that there were quality discussions happening, and a nice blend of the asynchronous and synchronous models, that kids have to engage in that discourse, because that's where a lot of the learning happens. But I'll let Molly talk about some specifics in WVA.
So we have been utilizing Kagan because a lot of our teachers were able to go to how to do Kagan in a virtual world, which was awesome. So really utilizing those breakout rooms has been one thing. Splitting students into smaller groups, not necessarily having large group instruction, but small group instruction, multiple small groups throughout the day, has been really huge for our teachers to be able to connect with students and students to connect with students. We've been using Nearpod a lot so that students can interact instead of just listening to a lecture, because we have found that is not successful. We also have Google and Google Docs, and students are collaborating on projects, collaborating on docs together. In high school, I know we have some project-based learning going on where students are working together to solve a problem, not just learning through video, but it's definitely been a learning experience, and we've been getting better every single day. But I think that we've really gotten away from the lecturing piece, which has been huge for our students.
Well, this has been really excellent. I think we're at time now, but I do want to say we probably needed an hour with you guys or longer, because I hopefully you guys will come back for the hybrid logistics discussion and David speaking, because after that we have a little bit more open time to ask you tons of questions about logistically, how are you pulling this all off? This is mind bending. Competency plus 3 different rails and social emotional wrapped in there, clubs. It's a lot. And people want to know this more than almost anything else. The real transformation, you guys are neck deep in it, and people are desperate to figure that out. And I think you guys are living it. So hopefully you can come back. For you, Melissa, the last hour on motivation is where we're going to talk about the primary motivators. It's kind of new data for a lot of people, and I think you'll find it interesting. So cool. So come back if you can, and then also tomorrow. All right. So thank you guys very much. I know it's a lot to take this, even a small amount of time of your schedule, and we're so grateful. And hopefully, tens of thousands of other people will be viewing this later and think they're going to have to call you. So watch out. Sorry about that too. So because they're all going to want to know you. You're going to be little rock stars from here on out. So thank you so much.
Hey folks, my name is Damien, and I'm a digital portfolio coach with Spaces. What does that even mean? It's kind of like being a tech coach in your district, except that I support way more teachers and way less tools. In fact, all of my efforts really are focused on one tool, the digital portfolio. I love helping teachers. I love being a coach, and I love that I get to help coach teachers. I love it so much, in fact, that I'm going to walk you through one of my favorite coaching exercises right now. So humor me for a minute and close your eyes. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Now I want you to picture one of your favorite students from years gone by. And I want you to get specific in visualizing this. Who is that student? What class are you teaching? What room are you in? How does your chair feel? Is it comfy? Is it rigid? Now, let's imagine that you and your student, you're just catching up after a long summer break away from school. You're both super excited to be back in the classroom. If I asked you to describe that student, what words come to mind? Creative, curious, kind-hearted, driven, funny, right? Exactly. Because you have amazing students with a story to tell, a story about their growth, their failures, their goals, their dreams, A story about who they are, who they want to become, and how they're going to get there. A story that can't be told by putting a number or a letter next to their name. So it's a story that a report card simply can't tell. Why am I telling you all this? Well, because now more than 400 districts are using our programs to empower their students to tell a story, to tell their story about why there's so much more than the grades on their report card. And they're using our digital portfolio tool to do that. We're offering a free launch year partnership for all Learning Council attendees. If you want to learn more about it, if you want to learn more about Spaces, visit morethanmygrades.com. Have a great day, guys.